Right. Tip number 3, Sammy. What are we going for here?
Use the same questions with different numbers.
Oh, another great. You've really thought these through. I like the snappy titles.
Yeah, as I said, that's the only snappy part. The rest is just hot air for me, just chatting, going on tangents. But yeah.
Right, tell me more about this one, Sammy.
So again, like in the theme of accountability, let's say you introduce a question. So constantly saying to students, like, the most important thing for learning is to ask questions. You have to ask questions. You have to ask questions.
Yeah.
And so you model something. Questions. No. Okay, fine. We're doing the same question with different numbers, and you can literally just rub out the numbers and say, if you understood it, then this is absolutely no problem because it is the same question. And so it might be with mini whiteboards. It might be with like a do now. Let's say you give them a difficult do now, and then you say, we're doing this same do now tomorrow with different numbers. So you ask questions now. You write down your purple pen notes now so that you can look back at them tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm expecting every single person to answer every single one of these without any problems. It might be a nice thing to do, which I've done a lot of, is with my year 11s particularly, is just retests. I used to literally use Tipex to Tipex out the numbers and just write new numbers on.
Nice.
But now we've got like these nice laptops from my school, and we can just like get a PDF up and just like colour them in white and black and rewrite new numbers on. But principle is Tipex copy style retests, and you say to them, like, wait, before you start the review, so we're going to review in the usual way, it's group work, and I'm going to stop you every so often and like ask people to explain things they got wrong. But on top of all that, at the end of the review period, we're going to do a retest. It's going to be the questions that the class did badly on, and it's going to be the same questions but just different numbers. And anyone who doesn't do well on this, I'll know you just didn't do this review properly. So yeah, pretty much that. And like, there's all kinds of different, but like, it might be, we try not ever to get kids to write, just copy stuff down from the board. So when we want a nice example in books, it'll be like that situation. We'll model one, then we'll rub out the numbers and be like, right, now you do this one in your books nicely. And obviously if they get it wrong, they have to write a purple pen note, because always you want them to be thinking as much as possible. So
Sammy, you've chucked a couple of things in here that we need to follow up on. This is great. So the first thing is, the first time I heard something similar to the change numbers thing for low stakes quizzes was when Danny Quinn, former head of maths at Michaela, was on my podcast years ago, and she described the process where the kids would be given a low stakes quiz, and then they wouldn't be judged on how they did on that. They do it very low stakes. They do it in class. Maybe answers are up on the board. Teacher goes through it, blah, blah, blah. But then the teacher says to them, okay, your homework over the weekend is to prepare for the follow-up quiz where you're going to get the exact same questions, but the numbers are going to change. And I'd never heard of this before, but the point Danny made, and I'm assuming it's a similar point that you're making here, is that how the kids do on that first iteration, that's maybe down to either ability, achievement, knowledge, and so on and so forth. But how they do when the numbers change, that's almost all down to effort. They've no reason they can't do that, as long as they have given time and opportunity to figure out whether it's from the group or from the teacher. So it's a real good way to hold them to account, because there's no excuse. And Danny was saying how parents would phone, because I think this was where I got the NSPCC contacting. It was all kicking off, because Danny would then, I think, maybe put them in detention or something like that if they did bad on the follow-up test, and everyone was, you can imagine people kicking off. But her point that got lost was they had every opportunity to do well on that follow-up test because they knew what the questions were going to be. It's just the numbers were going to change. Is that a similar kind of philosophy, if that makes sense?
Nail on the head, absolutely. I'm all for that detention there, to be honest. Like,
they'll be on to you, Sammy. Be careful what you say. No wonder you're not on Twitter.
Yeah, like, as long as you set them up for success fairly, like you've given them, you've made sure they've had space for questions. You've modelled it really cleanly. You have to like hold yourself to account as well and be like, have you actually done a good enough job there? Giving them time to talk out in groups, maybe like maybe even giving them another question there and then and check and be like, if you check and let's say they do now, they don't get it right, you reteach one of the questions, they do a mini whiteboard question, everyone gets it right, and you say to them tomorrow, look, everyone's got it right, every single person. This is coming up tomorrow, and I'm just changing the numbers. if you don't get it right, I'm going to keep you afterwards because something like you, because and you say to them tomorrow because like fair enough if they can't remember. I think like if they're struggling to remember, that's understandable. But if you let them look back in their books at the purple pen notes that they've made in their strategy, there is absolutely it's completely justified to say to them, you must get 100% in this because like either you weren't asking questions or you copied someone when you're doing mini whiteboard, which is not okay. Or you were lazy when it came to writing purple pen notes, and therefore when it comes back to like you've forgotten, which isn't your fault, but when you get the chance to help yourself, because I've not made it a test, I've said you can look at your notes, whatever notes you made. If they don't help you, then you obviously did it badly, and that's on you.
That's good. That I like that. And the second thing, and that you chucked in towards the end there, and this is something I've been thinking about, sort of some work I've been doing with the school at the moment. You mentioned about the copying down. Now this is a massive thing because I would say 99%, 95% of maths lessons that I'm lucky enough to watch that involve a worked example, invariably the kids are asked at some point to copy down that worked example. And there's a number of issues with this, but the biggest is, and I've suffered from this myself, I call it the illusion of copying down, that there's this almost this belief that something magical happens from the process of a child copying something down on the board, that all of a sudden they understand it more, they learn it more, or something like that. And my other issue I have with this is, I'm not convinced that kids use their exercise books effectively for revision. It's not as if, you're looking back through all... Because books sometimes scruffy, disorganised, blah, 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 blah. And this worked example... Anyway, so I'm really intrigued what you do there. So let me see if I've got this right. So you're modelling one kind of version of the worked example, however you model it, but then the kids aren't writing that down in books. But then the version that they get down in books is essentially kind of like a your turn. It's the worked example, but with the numbers changed, and that becomes their model example. Is that right, Sammy?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So just tell me a little bit about this. So I like the rationale that you always want the kids thinking. That's I'm completely on board with that. How do you? I guess the big question. How do you want your kids using that worked example? Are you of the belief, and are the kids going to be kind of referring back to it? What's the purpose of it?
So the best way of revising maths is to do maths. Like, I'm definitely on board with what you've said there. I completely agree. I wouldn't want my kids reading through their notes and stuff when it comes to revising. However, a lot of students... I've never really been bothered that much about books. I've just never really cared that much, to be honest. But kids do see... somehow, maybe just because we make a big deal about the purple pen and how to reflect on mistakes and stuff... And so we do that first of all, so to force them to engage in mistakes, and they can write down feedback, so they understand, so they know what the right thing to do is, a strategy maybe. But also the better, kind of higher level thinking is they're reflecting on their own mistakes, articulating where they went wrong, and writing down what they need to do next time. And it's a really hard skill. We never arrive. It's definitely, there's always room for improvement, but it's something we aspire to. I keep saying we, like I'm talking about in my school. But I think. So because we've made such a big deal about purple pens, students they seem to care about their books, and they seem to care about the notes that they're making more than probably I do.
Yes.
And a lot of them do find it useful to refer back to them, especially if I'm doing something like the do now, and I'm saying write down purple notes because I'm giving you the same questions and you can look back at them tomorrow. So I don't really care, but students seem to by virtue of all the other things in place that we're trying to do to make them learn. And I think also, as a maths teacher now who's all right at maths when I was at school, I didn't really need to look back at my books because I just remembered stuff. Whereas a lot of the kids you teach actually do need that, and it's helpful if they can do that. And also, we do a lot of chants. We do a chant for pretty much every topic, like a call and response for pretty much every topic, and that's the sort of thing that they write down in purple pen. And if that's written down in their book next to that kind of question, it is helpful for them to refer back to it. So the answer is, and also for the same reason, that's also why we get them to have one clean example, at least one clean example in their book, so that if they want to, they can refer back to it when they're doing independent practice that lesson or later on that week or whenever it may be. If they come to revise and they really can't remember, and they don't think to ask a friend, or they don't think to come to their teacher, at least it's something they can do to help themselves before giving up. So that's the extent to which I care about neat examples and books. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. If I can just check I've got this right, I'm always interested in the logistics of this. So you're modelling a worked example on the board. The kids aren't writing anything down, or would they be possibly banging stuff down on mini whiteboards throughout, or is it just watching?
Just watching.
Yeah.
Watching, I think. In my school, everyone's got slightly different ways, but as a general rule, I think if you're modelling something from the start, you need everyone focused completely. Yeah.
And then you've gone through it, and then you're changing the numbers, and they're having a go, but they're writing it in their books. So just 2 questions on that. How are you assessing whether they've understood that bit?
Yeah, so sometimes I save the work to them writing in their books until I know they can do it. So sometimes I'll model it and we'll do some mini whiteboard questions. And the final mini whiteboard question, I will rub out the numbers and say, right, you're going to do this one in your books as your example. So it might be then. It might also be this all works better for higher attaining classes. And if you have lower attaining classes, what a lot of teachers at our school do is guide the students through a worked example, but if the knowledge the teacher hasn't told the students what's going on, the students so it's something that they've worked through as a class. They then write that down because it's something that they've done. It's like arguably it's copying, but I also think because the students have worked through it themselves rather than being told, it's a bit better than that. However, there was something really illuminating that was mentioned by a colleague of mine in a maths meeting recently. And she teaches the bottom set year, I can't remember, maybe year 7 class or year 8 class, and she was watching them write down a worked example that, like that, where they'd gone through it as a class. She'd got the information from them, and then she said, right, now write this down as your neat example. And she'd watched them copy it down, and they'd copied it down from like the bottom right of the example. They hadn't copied it like left to right and in the order of the thinking and the writing that we'd done it. They just copied it down as if it was a picture, and it was mind blowing. And there's so much to unpack there. Wow! But essentially, what I've taken from that is just really, again, copying down is so not helpful. Wow, Sammy! Yeah. That's your classic sign of almost kind of just a passive process, like you say, just copying a picture down, right? Yeah, that is incredible. Final question on this, Sammy. Just purple pen. Just clear up for me. What role does that play in this worked example part of the process? Yeah. So if let's say, we're doing it the way that I mentioned first, where you do a question, rub out the numbers, then new numbers, they do it in their books. If it's so I will circulate to get a sense. I'll circulate, targeting the students at least likely to know, and then and then I'll go through the answer, and then I'll say, if you've got anything wrong, you need to purple pen it. And so that might be a sentence, it might be with the perfect example, doing it properly, the bit they did wrong in purple pen, and explaining what they did wrong. So the slight issue with that is their neat example might not end up being neat. Sure. But I think it's still better than copying. Yeah, and for me, it's the ownership thing there. I'm always even if they do copy the example from the board, if they've got something in their own words, something personalised to them, whether it's annotations or whatever, that for me starts the meaning's there, and it's a bit more active. I should also say, just to be really honest about it, I've done a lot of learning walks where I've focused on purple pen notes and stuff, and the range of quality is incredible. Obviously there's some really bad purple pen notes where students have actually made an even bigger mistake with their purple pen, or said some nonsense. But I think the principle of something to work towards, where they're reflecting on mistakes, is a worthwhile, is really important. And using the purple pen simply for corrections and teacher top tips and chants is still really good, and in some ways is training them to reach that stage where they are taking ownership of it and doing their own thing. So it is still worthwhile, but I don't want to give off the wrong impression here that all of our students are writing ridiculously good metacognitive comments and whatever. It's just not the case. But a lot of them do it well, and some of them do it incredibly well, and some of them don't. And but it's still a worthwhile thing. That's great, Sammy. Just before we move on to tip number 4, you keep mentioning chants. Can you give us a couple of these chants? Get a couple of examples of these. Adding and subtracting fractions. Find the LCM. Perimeter is the distance around a 2D shape. There's a really good one, which is one of my favourites. You say right angle triangle, Pythagoras or trig. Side, 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 Pythag, label the longest side. Side, angle side, so, label the two sides. Cover up the one you want and use the formula. So, like, you know, you can question the pedagogy in some of those things, like, you know, using the formula triangles for SOHCAHTOA and whatever, but in terms of, like, it's quite powerful, because you teach that with, you teach as a mind map. It's like, you see a triangle, are you finding area, yes or no? If no, is it a right angle triangle? Then you go through that whole chant process.
Yeah.
If it's not, then you go through two angles, two sides, sine rule, write the one you want on top. If not, three sides, one angle, cosine. You kind of go, and you teach it as this mind map, but then the chants reflect it, and they take them through the thinking. And it's really, like, it's also, because that one's good because it's got quite a good beat.
Yeah, I was going for that, I like it.
You have to really, like, embrace, you have to buy into it, and like, I think... You know it's ridiculous, and the kids know it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But if you're just unashamedly into it,
yes.
and even if they don't want to do it, if you keep doing it and pushing them into it, then then we're not going to move on until you're going to do the same level of enthusiasm as I'm giving. Particularly if you do it from year 7, then by year 11 they're just bought in, and it's just a normal part of life. So
that's great, Sammy. That's brilliant.